Anyway, I promised you that we would, or didn't promise you, but it's a good thing to do to start on time. By the way, let me get you used to the chat. What's really cool tonight is, of course, we don't have to use the chat because we can use this. But so, in fact, I'll get rid of the chat. But let's flip over here. What I want to do first up is just to. By the way, can you see my screen okay with the stuff? Okay. So what I want to do first up is just kind of lock us back to where we were a couple of weeks ago, and then build on that, if that's okay with you. Would that be okay? So we'll do this. We'll go through this really, really quickly. And by the way, since I met with you, it's been a whirlwind. Hence the reason, John, thank you for pointing out that error in the link. When I put that down, it worked. And goodness knows what happened to the bit live, but something went wrong. But anyway, yeah, so since I've been with you, where have I been? Goodness me, that's right, I was down in Australia, then I've been back to, or then I've been Berlin, and then back here to Singapore. So it's been, wow. And this is about the first time that I've been able to sit down for a day. So anyway, I'm glad that you're joining me and that we can do this together. Just to revisit where we were at and get ourselves in the mood, this, you may remember I mentioned this guy if you were there early on the event at least. So this is David Rose, who said, as you may recall, any company designed for success in the 20th century is doomed to failure in the 21st. John, as a web developer, you'll be thrilled that I was just reading Mary Meeker's slides that she does every year from Recode up there, and it's just amazing what is happening, honestly. But anyway, beyond the scope of where we're going to go today. And then you may remember this guy, Lawrence Fink, I should say, the CEO of BlackRock, who said this wonderful thing that to prosper over time, we can't just deliver just great financial performance, but we need to make a positive contribution to society, and that's where we're going to be going tonight. Just by way of review, we talked about this serving legacy model. So we got you to draw, I think, as I recall, this sort of bell chart. And we said, if that represents number of businesses and that represents impact, then that's kind of what's happening. And by the way, just so that you know, we've been looking at this since 2007. And so this kind of thing is now rapidly accelerating along to what we call the blue zone, which is all about serving legacy. Now, we may talk a little bit more about that later on, and I'm going to certainly show you how we get into this. Also, by way of review, I mentioned this lady, Alison De Silva, who's the Executive VP of Purpose at Cone. And you may recall some of the things that she said. We'll just flip through them really, really quickly, although we really could spend an entire day talking about this. In fact, I was, I'll show you a little video that just happened a couple of days ago when I was in Berlin, and we'll meet with one of the world's, in fact, this guy was introduced as one of the world's most sustainable business leaders. And so we'll have a look at a particular video where he talks exactly about this. So it defines an authentic role. John was saying that, how did you put it, John? You were cranking out stuff that was not good. I think that's what you said.
I was churning out shit.
That's exactly what you said. Thank you, John, for putting it succinctly so that we can understand it. And John, you were saying that that's simply because the organization is focused on what you would consider to be the wrong things. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. Actually, last night here in Singapore, I got back the day before, and there was a meeting of B Corp. Are you guys familiar with B Corp? If not, you should be. B Corp is, there are about 2,600 businesses around the world that are B Corp, that have to go through a particular process. Look them up. They're kind of cool. And we are a B1G1 business. And last night, and there are only 8 of those in Singapore, there are 2,600 in the world. And there was a little meeting here of purposeful B Corp business. Interestingly enough, John, the reason I mentioned that is one of them, you might want to look them up actually, is a company called Palo, P-A-L-O-I-T. And they're an IT company. And by the way, they work with people like you too, who are redefining what it means to be a purposeful IT organization as well. So if you get nothing else out of this, John, there might be a job in the offering. You never know. So we talked about being able to authentically communicate purpose. And tonight, at least my time, lunchtime, your time, by the way, thank you for sharing lunch with me in a virtual way. Then we are going to get time to go much further into this than we did when we were together in Accountex. And there's some crucial words in this particular slide, all about impact and relevance and tangibility, and we'll have a look at that. Again, quick recap. We mentioned what happened on the 23rd of September. In fact, this is very relevant to what happened in Berlin. You may recall I mentioned that was the day that a number of business leaders, one of whom was this guy, Sir Richard, and together with him was a guy called Paul Polman, who is the CEO of Unilever, and he's regarded as a leading light of what happened that day on the 23rd of September when the United Nations, through Sir Richard and through Paul Polman, announced these things, that is to say, the Sustainable Development Goals. By the way, Felicity and Mr. Singh and John, before, whenever I'm speaking with large groups or with groups, I just check out who's heard of these Sustainable Development Goals. And what's interesting, I think the powers that be have a little bit of work to do in making people aware of them, because typically I'll find about 5 or 6% of people in the audience are actually aware of these goals. What would you class yourselves as being aware, or when we spoke, it was the first time you'd seen anybody talking about them? What was?
First time for me.
First time for you.
First time for me as well.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Wow. Anyway, these things were about just to reiterate, these things were about 3 years in development. They are the first time that the United Nations has come out and said that it's not governments that make a difference. It is businesses that make a difference. And these are goals that spread across, as you can see, these 17 areas. And in B1G1, which we're going to get to look at in a little while, then they are central to where we go in B1G1. And Branson put it this way. He said, businesses must become the real force for good in our world. Again, more on that in just a minute. And I mentioned, because it was accountants, John, with great respect, accountants can and must lead that change, but obviously that actually includes all of us. And in my view, accountants or people who are linking into business like accountants do, or for that matter, like web developers do, I believe we seriously do have a professional obligation to lead that change. Good news from your point of view, John, is we'll be looking at some websites that actually do that as we go through. Now, this is the particular piece that I wanted you to have a look at. If you recognize where that is actually Brussels. That guy, Brussels, that is actually Berlin. That guy is Paul Polman, who I mentioned earlier on. And we were there at a meeting of leaders who care about these things, and he was one of them. And it was the first time that he had taken a detailed look at something that we are going to be talking about in just a moment, and that is B1G1. And the person who developed that, who's actually sitting in the B1G1 office here right now, and that is Masami Sato. I mentioned that name because Mr. Coleman mentions that right up front. So let's have a look at that. Before I do that, let's admit someone else coming in there. I don't know who that is, but I know that their last name looks like it's Hypen. Hello, wherever you are. So come and join me in Berlin. Have a listen to this. I think you'll love it.
Well, first I'd like to thank Masami and the B1G1 movement for their enormous impact that you're having. 145 million acts of kindness already reached in this world. Nearly 2,500 companies belonging to this. And your philosophy is 100% right. Business is there to serve society. If we cannot find what our purpose is and positively impact society, we frankly have no reason for being. You captured that very well in the B1G1 movement. We have a wonderful opportunity right now in this world with the Sustainable Development Goals. 17 goals with a simple objective to irreversibly eradicate poverty and do that in a more sustainable and equitable way. And frankly, that agenda cannot be achieved without the private sector or the business community. If every business would see how they can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals, they will have a true purpose and a true reason for being. We see increasingly that the businesses are discovering the opportunities of the Sustainable Development Goals. Just looking at very simple areas of food and land use, at cities, mobility, and health and well-being, we think it unlocks about a $12 trillion opportunity, can create up to 380 million jobs, and yes, it will come from the small and medium-sized enterprises. I'm fortunately to be the CEO of Unilever, but in our value chain we have 80 to 100,000 small and medium-sized enterprises. And we certainly all want them to be driven by purpose. If and when they do, it unlocks an enormous energy, it attracts the talent, it makes people engaged at work, it cuts costs, it drives opportunities, and ultimately the long-term success of your businesses. I thank you for what you're doing, and I wish you a lot of success on your journey. Thank you very much.
There you go. So, Paul Polman, let me just stop the screen share for a minute and just get some feedback from you. How was all of that? Any observations on what Mr. Polman was saying?
So, if I'm right, what role does he fulfill in the Unilever?
Oh, he's the CEO.
Wow. That's kind of crazy as somebody of his stature and standing and power, saying that kind of stuff. It's mind-blowing.
When he suggested that he would do that video, we were mind blown as well. So yeah, particularly since he's played such an important part in the development of the goals, and indeed in terms of developing organizations like B Corp and all of that kind of stuff. And he's completely redefined the value chain that Unilever goes through. It's really, really very significant. So well done on recognizing that, John. And hopefully all of it. By the way, that also means that you could hear it this time, right? In the headphones. Any comments, Felicity? Is that, I know this is the first time you've heard of the global goals, but if you think of them in terms of, again, him saying that businesses need to take the lead in all of this, and that, in my view, accountants are, very principally involved in, or should be at least principally involved, not in reporting on history, but in creating history with their selected clients. And so that's hence the reason I say that we have a responsibility to do stuff like this. Any observations on that?
So I was really interested when you mentioned it, when you saw you at Accountex, and then you mentioned it, I went off and did some research and kind of talked here and things. But the fact that he talked about the businesses that are in his value chain and the SMEs in that value chain, and how he wants to drive down into those the importance of all of this, that to me is the crucial bit, and how we can encourage other people.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Okay. And
probably the hardest bit too.
Say again?
Probably the hardest bit too.
Yes, true. That's absolutely true. There's all sorts of things we're doing to make that possible. So thank you for that. And anybody else that wants to chime in, you can chime in on your microphone, or alternatively, the chat is open as well. So feel free to jump up on the chat if that makes it easier for you to contribute. And I notice that some of you are on the phone, which is a little bit difficult to chat on. But anyway, so go for it. The lines are open, as they say, on the radio shows. Okay, so with that background, that's essentially background. And now let's see how you and I can make sense of all that and how we can do things. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is take a look inside B1G1. I'm, by the way, right now I'm in the B1G1 office right here in Singapore. Again, it's just after 7:30. So if I were to show it out the window right now, you'd see this beautiful vista of Singapore by night, which is just amazing. And my friends all say I should be the Singapore ambassador So I love this place. So let's see. And talking of being here in Singapore, let me share my screen again with you, so that you can see something that's actually on my wall right now here at B1G1. And so up on the wall right there are 3 words. You can see what they are: impact, habit, and connection. And what they refer to is essentially what B1G1 is about. Now, one of the things that we're going to learn is, in order to get into this meaningful sense, in order to make a difference, in order to create impacts, then that means we need to give various things in various ways. And so the moment we mention give, many people go, oh, I see, it's charity. Well, what I'd love you to do is just forget everything you know about charities, because that's not what you're going to hear tonight. You're going to hear something quite different. These 3 words drive us. We think impact is important. That is to say that when you give, it should not be about, the chief executive standing up with a great big check saying, look at us. To put it more simply, it should not be about, the amount you give. It should be about the impact that is being created. And you'll see that in B1G1, we do that in a very interesting way. And you'll see how that works in just a moment. The other thing that is relevant about impact is that in B1G1, when you give 100%, fully 100% of your giving goes where you want it to go. But you'll see more about that in a second. Habit, again, when we think of the whole charity thing, which I told you not to think about, but typically when we think about it, we think about, the one-off events, the charity balls, all of that sort of thing, which may have a place, but the reality is they do not change the way we give. They simply don't change the habits. They're this one-off thing, and one-off, as you know, in terms of building businesses, is not a good idea. And then the third point, which is the one that I find the most important, is connection. One of the things that we talk a lot about is that we're moving from what we call the age of connection to the age of, and so, someone's got their mic open there. So when we're talking about connection, we don't mean having multiple Twitter accounts. What we mean is being connected to who we are as human beings, being connected to our team, being connected to our community, and of course, being connected to our customers or clients, and importantly, being connected to our world. So let me give you, and that's B1G1 brings all of those things together. Let me give you a couple examples so you can see how that works. And because, John, most of the people here, I think, are in accounting firms. So I've just picked a couple of examples from accounting firms so that you will get the understanding of what happens. What you see right there is one of the screens that people get to in B1G1. And there's this beautiful thing that you can do in B1G1, which is called, you can create giving stories. This is a very important example. In fact, it's a real example from an accounting firm in Cheltenham, actually. And what they decided to do was, if you think about impact and you think about habit, they decided that every time they would send an email, a child would get access to, was it access to water, or was it access to food? We'll have a look in a minute. Let me show you how they did that. So they would just go into their B1G1 system right here. This happens very quickly, by the way, so make sure you're tuned. And they would go in to add a new giving story. They then set up the trigger. When we send an email, they can put a picture of what that looks like right there. Then they just would select next. Now they will find a project. In this particular case, they are concerned with education. They find those projects. Oh, there's one. Look at that. That is e-learning. It's a brilliant project, amazing project in India. You can see that's a 1 cent project. So to create the impact is just 1 cent. They've now created that particular giving story, and you can see it there on the left-hand side of the screen. John, from your point of view, you see that little embed code right there, or that embed. When you click that, then, as you'll see in a moment, it's very easy to embed that into the site, into your site, and then you get real-time tracking of that giving. So now the question is, how might that appear in real life? So we know what it looks like internally. What does it look like externally? Well, let's show you an example of this. This is one from that accountant in Cheltenham. This was something that he sent me on, by the way, an award-winning practice. And if you go down to the bottom of that particular email, you'll see his little signature there, and you can see it says, sent from my iPhone and changing lives by providing a day's education for a child in need for our partnership with B1G1. So that's a great example of habit, of it all being about impact, and of course, it being, about it being about connection. Let me show you another example. One of the things that is true in B1G1 is that, again, that we track every single cent of the giving. And as you just saw, the giving can be from 1 cent. So there's no excuse not to do it. It's not this, oh, I'll wait until, such time. We all can do this. Now, on the left-hand side of that screen, and you, by the way, can see this live if you want to. You can see the name of the company there in the top left. But let's go through, it will change, by the way, because this was done about 2 weeks ago. So you can see a couple of things. This is on their site, on a page which is called their impact page. You can see that right up here. And you can see that we're tracking where their giving is going, and we're tracking it in here in 2 ways, on the map, and then we're tracking it on what we call the B1G1 widget, which would be, or both of which would be in real time. So let me just give this a click and you'll see how it works. So now we can go into the map and we can see specifically, just by flipping over those orange dots, what that particular accounting firm has done. They've been in B1G1 about 21 weeks, I think, something close to that. And you can see that, again, it's not, look at us, we proudly support XYZ charity or something. It's quite different. And then you see the giving stories. Have a look at these. I love these giving stories. Look at this one. When our favorite band comes on the Workday playlist, we give 3 music therapy sessions. And you can see, real time, 60 music sessions. Look at this one. When one of our favorite football teams scores a goal, I went a bit quickly there, but whatever it was, days of transportation are given. I could do that live, of course. But again, let me just continue on this track, and then we're going to stop in just a moment so that we can get some feedback on this. Here's another accounting firm. Oftentimes we're asked about the mix of local and global projects. One of the things that is very important about some of the projects that are in B1G1, there are some 500 plus projects. Each of those projects is what we call, well, not what we call it, is a high impact project. And the board of B1G1 rejects 9 out of every 10 projects. And so, because there are certain criteria that we have, not surprisingly, since we've been doing this for quite a while now. So here's an accounting firm that's in a very small town, actually, in Australia. It's called Ballina. It's a town of 26,000 people. So they're kind of concerned about local giving as well as global giving. And so let's have a look at how they solve this. I think you'll see this in an interesting way. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip up into that impact link there again. And there we see that their giving can make an impact. Again, we see the why. Now, have a look here. Those things that are in the blue are local projects, and those particular projects would never get into B1G1, and the accounting firm is aware of that. Then on the orange thing, you say they talk about, oh my goodness, look at what we do around the world. You can see the giving impact that they've created. And so now anybody in that particular town, which is called Ballina, is going, oh my gosh, these guys do local, therefore that's really good, and I love that. And they do global. And so what you see is this lovely combination between local and global that's possible in the B1G1 framework. Here's another example which is kind of interesting. This shows you exactly what we did, but it adds something interesting to it. So bearing in mind those sustainable development goals. So there's a guy, his name is James McGregor, as you can see, and he has on his business card, like all B1G1 guys, he has proudly a B1G1 business for good partner. By the way, the reason he puts that Felicity on his business card is because it simply changes the outcome of the conversation. It's as simple as that. So James, or for that matter, any accounting firm, or for that matter, John, any web developer or whatever, can now say, whenever someone does business or connects with us because it doesn't have to be necessarily doing business, then we make sure something great happens in our world. And that something great is something that's under your control. You can change it in a heartbeat. So, for example, Felicity, if one of your clients was concerned with, let's say, women's health or women's empowerment, they might be selecting microloans that would be done. Is that making sense? You've got this massive choice of where these projects go. So let's have a look how James does it. And what we're going to do is we'll flip into his website. He's actually a training company as well. And so we'll flip there, we'll go up and we'll have a look at, we'll show you where he now would look at, well, we will look at his impact page. Here we go, looking at the impact page. And if you watch this very carefully, I think you'll be very impressed by what we see. So there's the why, that's the purpose thing right up front there. Then we see the impacts, and we see the map that we've kind of seen already. In this case, a slightly different map because it's James's map, but have a look at this. This is the thing that I think is really impressive, where we're now tracking James's company's impact across the global goals, and we're doing that in real time as well. So that, I've gone kind of quickly there, and I'm going to stop in just a second to get your feedback on what you just saw. But ahead of that, let me just try and make sense of what you've seen by giving you 7 things that we find are important. So just to cover those things off, one of the things you've seen is that you can match your giving to things that your customers love. Doesn't have to be, we proudly support something. You can flip it literally in a heartbeat. There are 627 stunning high impact projects. I've already mentioned to you that the board rejects 9 out of every 10. What that means is whenever you see a B1G1 project, you know it is a really solid project. You know that, and it's actually doing what it says it does. You can give, as we said a minute ago, from just 1 cent, and 100% of your giving goes where you want it to go. Now, both of those things, of course, are really, really unusual. And part of the reason for that, by the way, is the model that B1G1 operates under. So this is what people now refer to as a movement, and people invest a little bit, not very much, to be a part of the movement. And we'll show you that. In fact, we might even invite you to that later on. As you've seen, it's never about how much you give. It's always about the impact that you're creating. And you can see how we track every single impact that you're creating. So what's happening here is, if you go back to that whole thing about purpose and meaning and all of those kind of things, this is now giving people a very practical way of expressing that into their user base. And importantly, you are always in total control. Now, there's something really cool I want to show you in just a minute, but I've just been going blah, 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 which is not a good way to be. So let me stop for a minute and get your feedback and or questions as to what's gone on so far. Do give me some ideas.
So one of my questions is, why would people, well, I guess it's not really a question, I guess I know the answer, but it's interesting to me that the way most businesses look at it, and the way I've traditionally looked at it, is you make 1,000, let's simplistically say you have profit of $1 million every year, and you would say, all right, 20% of that goes to some kind of charity. Whereas what you're doing is you're saying, forget about the profit. It's kind of independent of the profit. It's based on these kind of triggers, these micro actions.
Yeah.
And so I guess it opens up the potential, theoretically, for somebody to actually spend so much money with B1G1 that they make negative profit. And obviously nobody would be that silly, I'm sure. Like they would choose goals that. But anyway, yeah, it's kind of
always in control, because when you look at the project, you always know what it costs. I can show you that, from like 1 cent to whatever it costs to make that impact. So you're always aware of what it's costing to actually make that impact, if that makes sense.
But I guess there's no way of you predicting how many emails you send in a year.
Oh, absolutely not. If you do that, that's a different kettle of fish. That's absolutely, that's true. Though you would, in that case, you would unhook. You would simply unhook that.
Yeah. Where I'm going with this is not a criticism of B1G1 at all. Where I'm going with this is what I would love to see is all of this completely automated, and then a dashboard that you can see as a company, hey, here's where we're going with our spending.
And if I were to show you the B1G1 dashboard, you get exactly that.
Right. Okay.
So that's already.
But the other thing is, I guess one of my questions is, where somebody sends an email, like, how do they know how much to give to B1G1? How do we?
Because it's just a simple matter. In that particular case, they know that that particular project that they've chosen, which is a 1 cent project, right? So they know if at the end of the day they've sent 100 emails, that's $1. They know that.
Right, but they track how many emails they sent internally.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is, it would be great to help not for B1G1 to do this, but the way I would look at doing this in my business once it's actually, set up and everything, is to have some kind of an automated thing so that it actually tracks how many emails and all the rest.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. Absolutely correct. And in Felicity, let's say, for example, where you're advising clients, and I'm sure that some of those people that you advise, they actually have just become new clients or something like that. So let's say you were going through welcoming a new client, for example, you might typically shake their hand. I'm sure you would do that and say, welcome to the firm and all of that kind of stuff. And you give them the firm brochure and, all of those things and pictures of the partners, the things that people do. But you might also give them an envelope, and inside that envelope, or the envelope might say, please don't open this until you're in the car. And the reason it says that is because you don't have to do it that way, but it's because it creates what we call a second moment of connection. So they get the envelope. They obviously will not wait until they get in the car. They'll open that thing. And then let's say their name was John, and it might say, hi, John, when you joined us in XYZ accounting firm, then there was one thing we forgot to tell you. We forgot to tell you that every time we do business together, we make sure something great happens in our world. I thought you'd love to know, in this particular case, and by the way, here's the weird thing. By the way, this is me sort of living it. But for some strange reason, please don't ask me why. Accountants love goats. I have no idea why accountants love goats, but they do. So it might say something like, as in this particular case, what's happened is we're sending 2 goats to Kenya to give some families sustainable income for life, or more correctly, I guess, for the life of the goat. And that's been made possible by our membership of B1G1, and again, you're in total control of that, because if you knew that John was into whatever it was John was into, it could be music, for example, and you might find some music projects there in B1G1. So the guy gets that, and it's like, oh my God. And so what do they talk about? They don't talk about the fact that they've just joined the accounting firm. Well, they probably do that, but they would then say, my goodness, look at what's just happened. And I can show you lots and lots and lots of examples of those kind of things. Now, so Felicity, there I was talking about what you might do. Love to hear your comments too. Thanks, John, for yours too.
I really like it, and I actually like the fact that it's, again, like you said, taking the focus off that passive will give so much to charity. It's based on the actions, which is really nice. But it makes it a kind of passive giving, especially, John, you could get the automation working so that actually it wasn't something we tracked. We physically counted the emails at the end of the day, but if you could get that automated so that actually at the end of the week or at the end of the month, we could turn around in meetings and say, actually, this week we've sent this many emails, how exciting. But actually what that means is we've given this much charity. It's a good thing from a staff motivation point of view as well, not just kind of the business and kind of whatever else that might bring. Staff like to know that they're doing good, and it kind of puts a positive tangent.
Exactly right. In fact, just recently, Felicity, you raised an interesting point. And just recently, we did this little exercise here, which is a useful exercise to do, because when I speak, for example, one of the things I frequently talk about is how easy it is to fall in love with what you do rather than fall in love with the customer. Okay? And so we were taking a look at that here, and we asked the team members, okay, guys, write down what you typically say when you speak with a member, a potential member. And not surprisingly, they said things like, well, you can give from 1 cent, like, 100% the giving goes, those things that we just went through, all of that stuff. And then one of our team members, Sharon, decided that what she would do is she would call some customers or members and see what they said. And those little software things where you put words up and then the most used word kind of zooms out. So we did that, and interesting enough, the word that zoomed out was transform, because the customers were saying, the members were saying, yeah, but that's all very important, but what B1G1 does is actually transforms our business. And the reason they said that is precisely what you just said, precisely. That, because the team members are involved in the giving and all of that kind of stuff. In fact, let me show you how that might work. Any other observations, anybody? Felicity, feel free to add more. And by the way, that was very insightful of you.
I absolutely love this idea that based on the customer's preferences, that determines what you say you're going to give. Exactly. I think that is completely revolutionary and an incredible way of making that extra connection, as you say, with your customer, saying it's not about me, I don't really care about what I'm into, it's what you're into that matters, and I'm going to tweak my giving based on that.
Yeah, it's really cool. And what you see, John, is all sorts of examples of that. Like for example, you would probably have seen where people embed B1G1. So you've probably seen these things where, people send invoices, for example, and they want to get the invoice paid. And so they say, 2.5% discount or something like that, for paying on time or whatever it is. Not surprisingly, perhaps, B1G1 people now wrap B1G1 into that. And so they'll say, when you, instead of the 2.5%, they might say, we protected 3 hectares of rainforest, or whatever it happens to be, or, some orangutan habitat or whatever, right? And of course, what's really interesting, not that this is important, but what's really interesting is that is a lot less than 2.5% of the invoices most time, right? It could be a few cents. And what's interesting is the customers go, oh, that's really cool. And then what the business does is change up what they give next month. It might still be in, for example, the environmental category, but it might be something else. And so what the B1G1 members report is, it's interesting because their invoices now get looked at, because the people who pay them go, oh, I wonder what it is this month, right? So you're getting that connection. The other thing that's very interesting, Felicity, about what you said is, whilst it's possible, you really hit an important point. As whilst it's possible to, automate all these things and so on and so forth, what typically happens is people unhook that automation that's there. And the reason is that they just love being able to go, oh, what do we do this time? And just change it rather than automate the entire process. And with that in mind, actually, have a look at this. Let me just share my screen again. And this you will love. Well, I shouldn't say that, should I? Hopefully you'll like what's about to come up. So let's see. If I just share my desktop, what happened last year, and hopefully you can see what looks like an iPhone there. Can you see that? Is that what you've? Oh, just stopped it. Let me do it again. An iPhone. There we go. Last year, when actually in April last year, we crossed 100 million giving impacts, which is I think you may kind of have forgotten the history that, in 2007 was when the idea came. It took us 3 years to figure out how to do that. And then from 2010 through 18, we've been very privileged to be doing this. So anyway, in April 2017, we crossed 100 million giving impacts. I'll tell you right. Let us see. We'll do live actually what we're up at today. I think it's something like 148 million giving impacts, which speaks volumes for how little tiny things can make major differences. But let's have a look at this. So we released this app. It's called Impact Now. So let me just play you this recorded from my iPhone a couple of days ago as to what happens on the app. So imagine your team members, or for that matter you, doing this. And so you just open up the app right there, and you'll see you can do business giving and personal giving. So here's a typical story, which is, or giving story, when someone attends a reInvent event. That's one of my events. What happens is we give 76 days. That there were 64 people there, so we multiplied it up, and bang, right there on the app, we did it. Now, the great thing is as well, Felicity, you can put your personal giving on here. So on my iPhone or my giving, I have something like when I complete a run, you can see right there, I do that. And so, sorry, the volume was a bit high, but anyway, hopefully you see what's happening there. And also, of course, when you give, you don't have to do this. But this is, I was doing a program in Australia last Wednesday morning, and there was a guy in the room, and he had given, he's a B1G1 guy, and he'd given that morning. And what happens, of course, is you can then automatically flip that up into, the various social media channels and do some interesting stuff on there. Talking of interesting stuff, let me show you how accountants are now using these ideas. For example, imagine going into an accounting office that looked like that, and sitting across the table from, for example, Felicity, you in a business advisory mode. It doesn't take you too long to realize that the client is going to be saying, "Oh, so what's that?" Right? And the people who have those things in their boardrooms now say it's very, very interesting. There's another one. It's very, very interesting to see what goes on when clients are sort of focused on these things, because it gets, it really gets straight away to the point that this is a very different firm that they're talking with. What do you think would be the impact of that, Stephanie, Felicity, sorry, in the business, in yours?
So for us, I think actually it would change the impact of the conversation. So it would just change the conversation, and then we'd start talking about their business and how that could be turned around on that. And we talk about their business and their goals. That's obviously at the forefront of what we talk about anyway. But to talk about it in that kind of way and how they could impact society, that's a whole different conversation, which I don't think we've ever had before.
Yeah, what do you think? Oh, sorry. What do you think would be the impact of that?
Apart from just a more positive conversation anyway, and like I think you'd be more engaged in the conversation, to be honest, from both parties, because it's suddenly not about just doing business, it's about kind of how it re-engages you almost in your business, about how you can change the world almost. I mean, I'm being a bit fancy, but it changes how that conversation happens and the end results of it. And generally it's on a more positive, it reignites that passion, I think.
Okay, so John, any comments on that?
Yeah, that there is a tendency, isn't there, of every business owner, and it's totally natural, and I have it as well. Everybody does, to talk about themselves, and so immediately, if you step into a room and there's something outside yourself and outside the company,
precisely,
then you can immediately, it's not even just the conversation changes to talking about doing good in the world, which is an incredible place to start a conversation. Immediately the focus is not on you, not on yourself, it's on the outside world.
Exactly. So
You can see how it influence a conversation and how can we make an impact in your
Whoops, I lost you there. I think somehow or other you muted. But anyway, I got where you were going. And by the way, the others who, for some reason, first name, I should have a little tab of the first names here. But anyway, I can see your last name. One is Singh and one is Heighton, I think. If you'd like to comment on the chat or just on your phone, then go ahead, make some comments. So Felicity, let me use you as the, hopefully a nice way, as the kind of litmus test here, since John, you're kind of like a ring-in, right? As much as my expectation was, oh my goodness, everybody's going to be an accountant, right? So that didn't quite work out. So Felicity, since we can see you and since you have been talking, you are going to be our litmus test. So from here on in, Mr. Singh asked, what is the next step? Well, we're just going to get to that right now. Fantastic question. So what I was going to ask you, Felicity, as this litmus test, we're going to make sure, you're the accounting world is now on your shoulders. Okay. So let's imagine that the firm that you worked in, or that you're working in, was your firm, right? What would, and it may not be, but what would you suggest should be done right now?
I'd suggest we should be looking at bringing this in, working out how we can put this. Well, actually, to be honest, first I'd work out how we can get this through to our staff and how this can impact our culture first, because I think it has to be culture led first before you start making the impact out to clients.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me show you. I'll assume that's I would like it, right? I'll assume that's what it was.
For me, yeah.
And certainly, Mr. Singh joining us there is saying, "What's the next step?" Well, let's take a look at what the next step might be. And bear in mind, let me just share my screen right here. And bear in mind, as I share it, let's go back to that model that we showed you earlier on. And essentially, what I hope you're getting is that what we've talked about is moving you into this blue zone, right, and serving legacy with this deep realization of being on purpose and then being able to express that through this thing called B1G1. So assuming that we would like to get some numbers on like a typical question would be, in fact, I had one this afternoon, it's like, wow, this is awesome. How do I join? Well, let me show you how you do that. And by all means, take notes on this as you go through. So if you've got a pencil, there'll be some numbers that you might want to take a note of. There may even be some links that you want to take a note of as well. So essentially, there are two ways of doing this. You can join B1G. Well, I mentioned that tiny little number as an annual member of the movement. You get everything, and obviously much more than what you've seen here, much more. But you've just seen the tip of the iceberg, as it were. And since it's annual, then obviously you'd renew. We'd love you to renew each year. So let me just show you how that works. So what happens is, this is one way of doing it. And these, by the way, these numbers that you're seeing there are US dollars. Okay. So that's 190 a month over 3 months, and then it's done. You could also do that as a once-off, in which case I think it's 540 US or something like that. Now, John, in your case, it might be a little less than that because of the relative size of the businesses. But I'll give you a link in a moment where you can see exactly that. So that's one way of doing it, and it's a fantastic way. The other way, which a lot of people do now, is to say, well, why would I worry about this, every year? Why don't I just go, oh, man, this is great. I'm going to be in it for 10 years. And when they do that, something interesting happens, which is actually relatively challenging for me to talk about, but stay tuned and I'll do my very best to talk about it in a way that makes sense for you. And you can see down there, it's $297 a month, again, US dollars. I'll convert that for you in just a minute. Over 11 months. That's for the full 10 years. You don't have to do that every year. That's it. Once you've done that, it's done. So everything else from there is gratis, if you will. Now, there is an and on this, and the and is that you get me. Now, by the way, if we were live, Felicity, Well, we are live, but if we were face to face, I would say, and I totally understand if you didn't want to get me. But anyway, but what you actually get is me mentoring you, and you would have seen something in the Accountex. Oh, what is that? It looks like something's happening in our building here. Anyway, if we burst into flames, you'll know about it. So it says, you get me mentoring you to help you build a serving legacy extraordinary business. Let me just talk a little bit about that mentoring so that you understand what that is. By the way, that's not necessarily about integrating B1G1 into your business. Once you're B1G1, there's a whole group of support people over here who are working with you to make sure that you're integrating B1G1 in the best way possible for you. So this mentoring is actually something different. It's actually about building your business. Now, certainly we might talk about B1G1, but the whole focus is how we grow your business. Now, outside of B1G1, I'm fortunate enough that people invest. Again, these are US dollars. You can see the number there, 3,600. It's actually a little bit more than that now, about 3,900 a month to have me do this mentoring. But when you're part of the premium partnership model, then that, and I know that sounds crazy, it's completely complementary to you as a B1G1 premium partner. That mentoring, by the way, again, it's one-on-one. It's on your schedule. The only thing that we say is that it has to be on a Monday. And what you would do is the moment you would join, for example, you get all the usual emails that you would expect, plus you get all the support links so that you can link to the people there. And then the other thing you get is a link to the mentoring calendar. And just so that you can figure this out, the mentoring is one-on-one, it's on Zoom, it's recorded, all of that kind of stuff. And this is not the typical mentoring where, the mentor sort of asks a question and goes, something like that. This is where we are working together. I'm doing the work as well, working together on particular projects that will advance your particular cause. It's a pretty extraordinary thing that we do together. And you can tell, I guess, from my smiles, given that you can see me still in the little window up there, that it's something that it's just extraordinary. I love it. It's a way of giving back for me. And frankly, it's also self-serving because I get the world's best stories. Believe me, I do. So I mentioned that what I would do is put that in US dollars, in pounds for you. So let me do that. You've probably already figured it out. Oh, before you do, you'll see there's the link. If you would like to join annually, just click on that link. It's pretty simple. And you'll see various options depending upon the size of the firm and so on. You'll see you can do it once off, or you'll see installment options as well. If you'd like to do the one on the right-hand side, that is premium. And by the way, just so you know, that's like a secret link. We only talk about this when we've had the opportunity to talk with someone, like we've been talking with you tonight. Someone else has joined us. For some reason, not sure why at this particular point. But anyway, we'll figure out what that is. Let's see. Someone else has come in. I'm not sure what it is, but maybe someone left and came back again. Anyway, so there it is. b1g1.com/premium is where you go for that. And now let's show you what that looks like in pounds. About an hour before we started this meeting, I did a little currency convert, and that was what it was at that particular time. Now, John, for the next thing that you're going to see is something that is just specific to accounting firms. So please just stay tuned. But understand that some of the things that we're going to be talking about here may not necessarily apply. One of the guys that is a very huge supporter of B1G1, and you may have seen some of his sessions at Accountex, is a guy called Steve Pipe. And one of the things that Steve did together with us in B1G1 about, 6 months ago, is there you go. When you join B1G1, Steve put together this really wonderful, wonderful thing, which is called, there we go, let me just admit some people here, there we go, which is called Get and Give a Million. So we've been speaking about the give. By the way, I could have shown you some amazing examples of firms that now set their targets in terms of what they give rather than what they get. And they say things like, you know, for every dollar of tax savings, we'll do certain things. It's really amazing how that works. And you can see that what Steve has done is gone together, Felicity, a whole host of, I was going to say templates, but it's much more than templates, that allows you to do these things that you see on the screen. And really, really interestingly, let's show it. It really sets up a fascinating model for you to have really, really compelling meetings. It's an extraordinary thing. If I were to take you to the Facebook page, which I'm not going to because of time, but if I were to take you to the Facebook page of the people who are accountants who are in the Get and Give a Million thing that Steve's doing, you would be stunned by the kind of things they talk about. So what you also get through Steve is a ready-to-use marketing system with all the guidance, the logos, the press releases, the website wordings, all of those kind of things to really launch this whole thing, this brilliant thing called Get and Give a Million. And you can cover all of those sorts of things with your clients. Now, what's interesting is because of the way this thing is done, and I know this is going to sound a little outlandish and look a little outlandish, but this is exactly what happens. This is an example from Australia. Well, actually, no, that's an example from the United Kingdom. Once you've had those meetings, what will happen is that your clients will talk about on a little thing called the impact, what it is that they're going to be doing. Here's the example from Australia. And you can see that in the client area, these are some of the very specific savings that people have been able to get, tax savings as it happens in this particular case, through working with this particular firm, which is called Inspire. And then you can see that what happens is they write up their impacts and all of that kind of stuff. So again, new clients who come in see this kind of stuff, and it's pretty amazing. Now, I know there's a question on the screen there that says, "Are you in?" That's a question that Steve usually asks. I'm not going to ask you that though, although it was there, just my error, I must say. But what I wanted to let you know, Felicity, was, we can see whoever it was on the iPhone now. Hello. Very good. And Felicity, and then we've got another iPhone listener who is, we can only see like the top half of their head, but anyway, whoever you are, hi. So Felicity, that you just saw, and you saw that much of it as opposed to that much of it, when you join B1G1 through those particular things, all of that, and it's massive, is yours, and Steve decides to give that free. Once you jump in and let us know that you're going to do that, then what we will do is give you the link so you can download. It's pretty massive download. You can download all of that stuff and much more than we talked about there from Steve. So that's what happens. So John, you enjoy your time?
Yeah, it's been great. I've just signed up, so yeah, it's really good. Just take action while you got your card here, right? That's good.
Oh my goodness! That's
so I'd use the time while you were talking about accountancy stuff just to
just, and Felicity, just so that you know, John is not a plant, okay? I mean, that would have been great. No, I think I might use that, John, that's wonderful. That is wonderful. I'm looking forward, John, to serving you in an extraordinary way. Thank you so much for being here. And Louise, looking forward to, connecting some more as you as you digest all the things that we've digested. And Louise also, Felicity also, if you need it, just email me, and because we recorded all of this, and so we could send you the recording. Of course, you may want to remove any comments that you made, Felicity, but anyway, we
No, I'll definitely email you for that, for sure.
okay.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay. Catch you guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye-bye.